Hello, and welcome to the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program Participant Annual Briefing. This briefing should help to remind you what to expect during your participation and what is expected of you during your participation. If you should have any additional questions after this briefing, please contact the Housing Authority where someone will be available to answer any questions you may have. McKean County Housing Authority is committed to ensuring full access to participating in our housing programs. If you need an accommodation for a disability in order to have full access to our services, please let our housing staff know. This briefing is intended for current Housing Choice Voucher participants who are completing their annual recertification or who are currently moving to a new unit. All participants were provided a handbook during your initial briefing. There is a copy available for your review on our website. You were provided with the Participant Briefing Acknowledgement Form. This will need to be signed and returned to the Housing Authority. If you are completing your annual recertification, please return your acknowledgement with your recertification packet. If you are moving, please return your acknowledgement with your move packet. Please note, an inspection will not be completed until this acknowledgement has been returned. It is important to know and understand what the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program is and what your responsibilities are as a participant of this program. The Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program is the federal government's primary program for assisting low-income families, the elderly, and persons with disabilities to afford decent, safe, and sanitary housing in the private market. Since housing assistance is provided on behalf of the Housing Choice Voucher tenant, participants are able to find their own housing. Housing Choice Vouchers are administered locally by public housing agencies that receive federal funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. This program can only be successful with a solid partnership between the Housing Authority, the landlord, and the participant. All three parties are connected by three different documents. The Housing Authority and landlord are connected by the HAP contract. The landlord and you, the tenant, are connected by the lease. You and the Housing Authority are connected by the voucher. This means that the tenant, landlord, and Housing Authority all have obligations and responsibilities to each other under the Housing Choice Voucher Program. It is important that you know and understand these responsibilities. McKean County Housing Authority administers the Housing Choice Voucher Program locally and provides the Housing Choice Voucher participants with housing assistance. The Housing Authority must determine that you are eligible for the program, issue you a voucher, ensure that the housing unit you choose meets minimum housing quality standards, make assistance payments to the landlord, and make sure that owners and participants follow the program rules in acting when necessary. The role of the landlord in the Housing Choice Voucher Program is to select a good tenant and complete any screening processes they determine to be necessary while following fair housing laws. They must provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing to the tenant at a reasonable rent. The dwelling unit must pass the program's housing quality standards and be maintained up to those standards as long as the owner receives housing assistance payments. They must collect the rent from the family and enforce the lease. Your responsibilities as a participant are to find suitable housing, take good care of that housing unit, abide by the landlord's lease, and comply with the family obligations of the voucher program and housing agency's rules. It is very important that you clearly understand these family obligations so that you may successfully participate in the program. Failing to abide by HUD or McKean County Housing Authority regulations may result in termination of your housing assistance. These obligations are listed in your handbook as well as on your voucher. We will go over them now. The participating family, including each family member, must supply any information that McKean County Housing Authority or HUD determines to be necessary, including evidence of citizenship or eligible immigration status, and information for use in regularly scheduled reexamination or interim reexamination of family income and composition. 2 missed appointments to supply the Housing Authority with this information is considered a breach of family obligations. The family must disclose and verify Social Security numbers and sign and submit consent forms for obtaining information. The family must supply any information requested by the Housing Authority to verify that the family is living in the unit or information related to family absence from the unit. The family must promptly notify the Housing Authority in writing when the family is away from the unit for an extended period of time in accordance with Housing Authority policies. The family must notify the Housing Authority and the owner in writing before moving out of the unit or terminating the lease. The family must allow the Housing Authority to inspect the unit at reasonable times and after reasonable notice. 2 missed appointments for inspection is considered a breach of this family obligation. The family must use the assisted unit for residence by the family. The unit must be the family's only residence. The family must promptly notify the Housing Authority in writing of the birth, adoption, or court-awarded custody of a child. The family must request McKean County Housing Authority's written approval to add any other family member as an occupant of the unit. The family must promptly notify McKean County Housing Authority in writing if any family member no longer lives in the unit. The family must give McKean County Housing Authority a copy of any owner eviction notice. The family must pay utility bills and supply appliances that the owner is not required to supply under the lease. The information that you provide must be true and complete. The family, including each family member, must not own or have any interest in the unit. The family must not commit any serious or repeated violations of the lease. The family must not commit fraud, bribery, or any other corrupt or criminal act in connection with the program. The family must not participate in any illegal drug, alcohol, or violent criminal activity. The family must not sublease or sublet the unit, assign the lease, or transfer the unit. The family must not receive Section 8 tenant-based program housing assistance while receiving another housing subsidy for the same unit or a different unit under any other federal, state, or local housing assistance program. The family must not damage the unit or premises, other than damage from ordinary wear and tear, or permit any guest to damage the unit or premises. The family must not engage in threatening, abusive, or violent behavior toward any housing authority personnel. The family must not be related to the landlord. The landlord cannot be the parent, child, grandparent, grandchild, sister, or brother of any member of the participating family. The only exception that may be approved by McKean County Housing Authority is if a family member is a person with disabilities. As a participant in the Housing Choice Voucher Program, there are annual activities that you should be aware of: annual recertification of income and annual inspections. There are 3 other types of inspections that will occur during your participation with the Housing Choice Voucher Program. An annual inspection will be completed on or near your annual recertification. A special inspection can be requested by the participant, landlord, or a third party. Generally, these are requested because the participant feels the landlord is failing to maintain the property appropriately, or vice versa. It is expected that you communicate any concerns with your landlord and allow the landlord reasonable time to address those concerns prior to contacting the housing authority. Quality control inspections are done several times throughout the year. These are re-inspections of randomly selected units that have recently passed inspection. This is done to ensure compliance with program regulations. If your unit fails an annual, special, or quality control inspection, the landlord and participant are provided with a list of deficient items. Depending on the severity of the deficiency, the time frame for repairs could be 24 hours to 30 days. The participant could be held responsible for breaches of HQS if they are caused by non-payment of utilities paid by the family, not providing or failing to maintain appliances not provided by the owner, and damages to the unit or premises caused by a household member or guest beyond normal wear and tear. If the family is responsible but the owner carries out the repairs, the owner will be encouraged to bill the family for the cost of the repairs. The owner is responsible for vermin infestation, even if it is caused by the family's living habits. However, if such infestation is serious or repeated, it may be considered a lease violation and the owner may evict for serious or repeated violations of the lease. McKean County Housing Authority may terminate the family's assistance on that basis. When it has been determined that a unit on the program fails to meet HQS standards and the owner is responsible for completing the necessary repairs, but fails to do so during the specified time period, the assistance payment to the landlord will be abated. In some instances, an extension could be granted in lieu of abatement. The tenant is not responsible for the housing authority's portion of the rent that is abated. When the deficiencies are determined to be the responsibility of the tenant and they fail to make the repairs in the specified time period, the tenant would then be non-compliant with the program and could therefore be subject to termination. In some instances, an extension could be granted. Annually, on your anniversary of your admission to the Housing Choice Voucher Program, the Housing Authority will re-examine your household income, size, and composition. This is done to determine your rent portion and eligibility. Failure to complete your annual recertification could result in termination of your assistance. In addition to the annual activities is interim recertifications. HUD requires program participants to report all changes in household income or composition to the Housing Authority between annual reexaminations. McKean County Housing Authority requires these changes to be reported within 10 days of the change occurring. Please note, additions to your household must be approved prior to moving in, with the exception of birth, adoption, and court-awarded custody. Before a minor can be added to your household, you must show proof that you have legal custody of the minor. All adults in the household must pass a criminal background check before they would be approved as a member of the household. Any adult who has been in the household more than 30 days in a 12-month period will be considered to be living in the unit and must be added to the household. When a change is made to your tenant portion of rent due to recertification, you will be notified and new contract paperwork will be mailed to you. In the instance that your tenant portion of rent increases, you will be provided with 30 days notice prior to the effective date of the change, provided that the Housing Authority was notified of the change in the proper time frame. Participants should review the handbook for examples of changes that would require reporting and the process for reporting these changes. Landlords may ask for rental increases on an annual basis. Before the rent can be increased on an assisted unit, the landlord must provide the tenant a 60-day written notice of the proposed rent increase. A copy of this notice must be provided to the housing authority. Landlords are also required to complete the authority's owner request for rent increase form. The authority will evaluate all rent increase requests to determine whether the proposed rent is reasonable based on the rents charged for comparable rental units in the unassisted market. If it is determined that the tenant was not given sufficient notice of the increase or the proposed rent is not reasonable, the proposed rent will not be approved. Oftentimes, landlords choose to sell their rental properties. If the family is in the first year of the lease term, the prospective buyer must agree to assume the terms of the current lease and contract. If the lease term has gone over the first initial 12-month period, the new owner can ask the family to vacate as per their lease. If you are a participant currently completing your annual recertification, you should have received an income recertification packet. It is important that you complete this packet in full and return it to our office as soon as possible. Please remember to return your acknowledgement form with your packet. If the participating family wishes to move to a new unit after determining that the family is eligible for the move, McKean County Housing Authority will issue the family a new voucher. If a family moves to another unit without notifying McKean County Housing Authority in writing, it will be considered to be a violation of the family obligations and reason for termination. Families will be eligible to move if the assisted lease for the old unit has terminated because McKean County Housing Authority has terminated the HAP contract for an owner breach, or the lease was terminated by mutual agreement of the owner and the family. The owner has given the family a notice to vacate, has obtained a court judgment or other process allowing the owner to evict the family, unless assistance to the family will be terminated. The family has given the proper notice of lease termination, if the family has the right to terminate the lease. Families will not be permitted to move within the Housing Authority's jurisdiction during the initial year of assisted occupancy. Families will not be permitted to move outside of the Housing Authority's jurisdiction under portability during the initial year of assisted occupancy. Families will not be permitted to move more than once in a 12-month period. McKean County Housing Authority will deny permission to move if the family has violated a family obligation or the family owes the Housing Authority money. Portability allows families to move out of the area while retaining their voucher. Under portability, families are eligible to receive assistance to lease a unit outside of the initial Housing Authority's jurisdiction. There is more information regarding portability in the handbook as well as on our website. Families who are currently moving should have received all of the paperwork necessary to process a move. This includes an income recertification packet and a move packet. Please complete the income recertification packet and return it to our office as soon as possible. Once you identify a new unit, you will complete the move packet with your new landlord and return it to our office so that your inspection can be processed. Please remember that incomplete move packets will not be accepted. There are sample documents in your handbook to assist with completing the move packet completely and correctly. As stated before, the initial term of the lease is 1 year and renews on a month-to-month basis unless terminated by the landlord or the tenant. The tenant must give the landlord at least 30, but not more than 60, days written notice that they intend to vacate the unit. This notice must comply with the lease. A copy of the notice should always be sent to the Housing Authority. Tenants are not required to give a reason to vacate. However, breaking the lease or giving insufficient notice may jeopardize their continued participation in the Section 8 program. The landlord may only terminate tenancy in accordance with the lease addendum, and the HAP contract. We do require, as per the HAP contract for the landlord and the family obligations for the tenant, that copies of termination and eviction notices be furnished to McKean County Housing Authority. If you ever receive a termination or eviction notice from your landlord, we strongly encourage you to immediately contact McKean County Housing Authority to discuss the matter. An eviction action is a very serious matter. If you are evicted from your dwelling because you violated your lease, you will not only lose your home, but you may lose your Section 8 voucher as well. Remember, McKean County Housing Authority is not your landlord. It is important that all tenants and landlords know and understand their lease in order to avoid evictions and/or terminations. In the event that your landlord must bring an eviction action, HAP payments will continue to the landlord until a court decision or your actual eviction from the premises. If the rent has been abated because of a failed inspection, no payments can be made. Landlords can never evict a tenant for non-payment of the authority's portion of the rent, only for the tenant's portion. Please remember that as a Housing Choice Voucher participant, you have obligations to both the Housing Authority and the landlord. Be sure you understand your obligations and are following all of the Housing Authority's rules and regulations as well as your lease to ensure you remain compliant with the program. If you have any questions, reach out to our office where someone will be able to assist you.